The blood bay stallion exploded from the breaking pen like hellfire itself, sending ranch hand Jake Patterson sprawling into the dust before his boot even cleared the stirrup. And Willa Kendrick knew in that instant she was watching something magnificent and terrible unfold. She stood at the fence of the Double M Ranch, her travel-stained dress clinging to her frame after 3 days on the westbound stage from St. Louis, watching the wild creature buck and twist with such fury that even the seasoned cowhands backed away. It was September 1884, and Silverton, Colorado had proven to be exactly as harsh and unforgiving as her aunt's letters had warned, though Willa had nowhere else to go after the fever took her parents that terrible winter. "That horse will kill someone before the week is out," said a weathered ranch hand to her left, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Threw every hand on the place. Boss is about ready to sell him for dog meat." Willa gripped the fence rail tighter, her knuckles whitening. The stallion was the color of fresh blood in the afternoon sun, its coat gleaming with sweat and fury. Something in its wild eyes called to the untamed part of her own soul, the part that had watched everything familiar burn away with fever and grief. "Miss Kendrick." She turned to find a tall man approaching, his hat pulled low against the September sun. He moved with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle, and when he lifted his head, she found herself looking into the clearest blue eyes she had ever seen. His face was sun-weathered and strong-jawed, maybe 26 or 27 years old, with a scar running along his left cheekbone that somehow made him more striking rather than less. "I'm Warren Mitchell," he said, removing his hat. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and he pushed it back with an unconscious gesture. "Your aunt wrote to me about your arrival. I own the Double M." Willa's breath caught. She had expected an older man, someone grizzled and distant. Her aunt had arranged this introduction, before passing suddenly last month, leaving Willa stranded between two worlds with nothing but a letter of introduction and $47 to her name. "Mr. Mitchell," she managed, extending her hand. When his rough palm closed around her fingers, a jolt ran up her arm that had nothing to do with the autumn chill creeping down from the San Juan Mountains. "Your aunt was a good woman," Warren said, his voice low and sincere. "She helped my mother through her final illness 2 years back. I owe her a debt I can never repay. She mentioned you were looking for work, and we need someone who can keep books and manage the household accounts. My foreman's wife usually handles it, but she is expecting their 4th child and needs the rest." Behind them, the blood bay screamed again, and Warren's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the breaking pen. "What will you do with him?" Willa asked. "Sell him, most likely. We cannot afford an animal that dangerous. Already paid the doctor twice this month for broken bones." Warren's voice carried genuine regret. "Beautiful animal, but some things are too wild to be tamed." Willa turned back to watch the stallion. It had stopped bucking now and stood in the center of the pen, sides heaving, eyes rolling white. Maybe he just needs someone who will not try to break him. Maybe he needs someone who will work with what he is rather than what they want him to be. Warren studied her profile, something flickering in his expression. "That is an interesting philosophy for a city girl from St. Louis." "My father trained horses before he became a shopkeeper," Willa said quietly. "I grew up around them. He always said the best horses were the ones with fire in their blood. You just had to learn their language first. Your father sounds like he was a wise man." He was. The past tense sat heavy between them. Warren cleared his throat. "Let me show you to the house. Mrs. Chen, our cook, will get you settled. We eat at 6, and I will explain your duties then." The ranch house was larger than Willa expected, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch that overlooked the valley below. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks already dusted with early snow. The air was thinner here than in St. Louis, and she found herself slightly breathless as she climbed the porch steps. Mrs. Chen proved to be a small, efficient Chinese woman who spoke perfect English with only a trace of accent. She led Willa to a clean room on the second floor with a window facing east toward the mountains. "Mr. Warren, he is a good man," Mrs. Chen said as she laid out fresh towels. "Fair boss, pays on time, does not drink too much. You will be safe here, Miss Kendrick." The emphasis on that last word made Willa realize what a rare commodity safety must be for women in this rough territory. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Call me May, everyone does." She smiled, and the expression transformed her weathered face. "Dinner at 6, do not be late. Mr. Warren, he is punctual like a railroad clock." After May left, Willa unpacked her few belongings and changed into her other dress, only slightly less travel-worn than the first. She stood at the window watching the ranch hands move about their evening chores, her eyes constantly drawn to the pen where the blood bay stallion stood alone, still wild, still furious. Dinner was served in a large dining room with a table that could seat 12. Tonight, only 4 places were set. Warren sat at the head, and Willa was directed to his right. 2 ranch hands joined them, a grizzled older man introduced as Charlie Redstone and a younger one named Thomas Green, both polite but curious about the new arrival. "Miss Kendrick will be managing the household accounts and correspondence," Warren explained as May served thick beef stew and fresh bread. "I expect you all to extend her the same respect you would show my sister if I had one." The message was clear, and both men nodded. Charlie said, "Welcome to the Double M, miss. It is nice to have someone with manners around. These young bucks could use some civilizing." Thomas flushed red but grinned good-naturedly. Charlie thinks anyone under 50 needs civilizing. The easy banter helped Willa relax, and she found herself enjoying the simple, hearty meal more than any fancy dinner she had attended back in St. Louis. There was something honest about this place, something real. "Tell me about the Blood Bay," she said to Warren during a lull in conversation. "Where did he come from?" Warren set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "Found him running wild up in the high country last spring. He was leading a small band of Mustangs, and I knew the moment I saw him I had to try to bring him in. Took 3 weeks to catch him, and another 2 to get him down to the ranch. I thought with time and patience he might settle, but he has proven me wrong at every turn. How many men have tried to break him? 7, including myself." Warren rubbed his shoulder unconsciously. "He is smart, strong, and absolutely determined not to submit. I admire that even as it costs me money I cannot afford to waste." "Let me try," Willa said. The table went silent. Charlie's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. Thomas stared openly. Warren's blue eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Absolutely not," Warren said firmly. "You saw what he did to Jake this afternoon, and Jake has been handling horses since before you were born." "But Jake was trying to dominate him," Willa countered, leaning forward. "I could see it in how he mounted, how he held the reins. My father taught me different methods. Please, Mr. Mitchell, give me 2 weeks. If I cannot make progress, I will accept your judgment." "You could be killed," Warren said flatly. "I could be killed crossing the street. I could have died of fever like my parents. We are all dying from the moment we are born, Mr. Mitchell. The question is whether we live first." Something shifted in Warren's expression, a flicker of pain that suggested he understood loss more intimately than she had guessed. He was silent for a long moment, his strong hands wrapped around his coffee cup. 2 weeks, he finally said. "But you work with him from outside the pen first, and if at any moment I think you are in danger, the experiment ends. Understood?" "Understood," Charlie shook his head. Boss, this is crazy. Probably, Warren agreed, but his eyes never left Willa's face. But Miss Kendrick is right about one thing. Trying the same failed method over and over is its own kind of madness. That night, Willa lay in her new bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling into darkness. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the blood-bay stallion calling out, a wild, lonely sound that echoed against the mountains. She fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about fire and blood, and the way Warren Mitchell's eyes had looked at her across the dinner table like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. Morning came cold and clear. Willa dressed in her oldest clothes and found Warren already at the breaking pen, leaning against the fence with his arms crossed. The blood bay stood at the far end, watching them with suspicious eyes. "Morning," Warren said. "Sleep well enough." She joined him at the fence. "Has he been fed?" "An hour ago. He tolerates us bringing food but not much else." Willa studied the horse carefully. He was magnificent up close, probably 16 hands high with clean legs and a powerful chest. Scars marked his hide in several places, evidence of battles fought in the wild country. "What is his name?" "Has not earned one yet." "Everything deserves a name," Willa said. "It is the first step in being seen as an individual rather than a problem to be solved." Warren tilted his head, considering this. "What would you call him?" She watched the way the morning sun turned the horse's coat to flame, the proud arch of his neck, the fierce intelligence in his dark eyes. "Phoenix. He looks like fire, and he certainly rises from every attempt to break him." A smile tugged at Warren's mouth, transforming his serious face. "Phoenix it is, then. What is your plan, Miss Kendrick? First, just to be near him without demanding anything. Then we will see." She entered the pen slowly, not looking directly at the stallion. Warren tensed beside the fence but said nothing. Phoenix's head came up, ears flat against his skull. Willa sat down in the dust about 15 feet from him and simply waited. The horse snorted, pawed the ground, clearly expecting some attempt at control. When none came, his ears pricked forward slightly, confusion replacing aggression. Willa sat there for an hour, not moving, barely breathing. Warren watched from outside the pen, his expression unreadable. When they rang the bell for breakfast, Willa rose slowly and walked out without once looking back at the horse. "That is it?" Warren asked. "That is it for today. Tomorrow I will sit a little closer. You sat in the dirt for an hour." "I let him see me as something other than a threat." "It is a beginning." Warren shook his head, but there was something like respect in his eyes. "You are the strangest woman I have ever met, Miss Kendrick." "I will take that as a compliment, Mr. Mitchell." They walked to the house together, and Willa was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the easy strength in how he moved, the way the morning light caught in his dark hair. She pushed the thoughts away. She was here to work, to earn her keep, nothing more. After breakfast, Warren showed her to a small office off the main parlor where ledgers and correspondence were stacked neatly on a large desk. "Everything you need should be here. If you have questions, I will be out checking the south fence line most of the day." Willa settled into the work with relief. Numbers and letters were familiar territory, solid and predictable, unlike the strange new feelings Warren Mitchell stirred in her chest. The ranch accounts were meticulous, but she could see places where expenses might be trimmed, income increased. She made notes in the margins, losing herself in the comfortable world of figures and projections. She worked through lunch, only stopping when May brought her tea and fresh bread with butter. The sun was angling toward late afternoon when Warren returned, dusty and tired. He found her in the office, spectacles perched on her nose, surrounded by papers. "Any disasters in the books?" he asked from the doorway. Willa looked up, struck again by how the sight of him made her breath catch. No disasters. Actually, you are doing better than I expected. With a few adjustments, you could increase your profit margin by perhaps 15%. Warren stepped into the room, interested. What kind of adjustments? She showed him her notes, and they spent the next hour discussing the ranch's finances. Warren was sharp and asked good questions, but more than that, he listened to her answers with genuine respect. It was intoxicating to be taken seriously, to have her thoughts valued rather than dismissed because of her gender. Your father did not just teach you about horses, Warren observed when they had finished. No, he taught me about business too. He said a woman needed to know how to take care of herself because life did not always provide someone to do it for her. Willa's throat tightened with grief that was still so fresh. Warren was quiet for a moment. He was right, and I am sorry you lost him, Willa. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent warmth flooding through her. Thank you, Warren. His eyes darkened at hearing his own name on her lips, and for a charged moment, they simply looked at each other across the desk. Then May's voice calling them to dinner broke the spell, and they moved apart almost guiltily. Over the next 2 weeks, a routine developed. Willa spent her mornings with Phoenix, gradually moving closer each day until she could sit within a few feet of him without triggering his flight response. She talked to him in a low voice, telling him about her parents, about St. Louis, about everything she had lost. The stallion listened with pricked ears, his initial aggression mellowing into wary curiosity. Her afternoons were devoted to the ranch accounts and correspondence. Warren often joined her in the office after his ranch work was done, and their conversations ranged from business to philosophy to the shared experience of loss. She learned that his parents had died within a year of each other, his father to a riding accident and his mother to heartbreak and pneumonia. The ranch had nearly failed under the weight of his grief, but Warren had clawed it back to viability through sheer stubborn will. I understand what you meant about living while dying, he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. After my mother passed, I realized I had a choice. I could die with her, or I could make sure this place she loved survived. Some days the choice is harder than others. Willa reached out without thinking and laid her hand over his where it rested on the porch rail. Warren turned his palm up, threading his fingers through hers, and they sat that way until full dark, not speaking, not needing to. The ranch hands noticed the growing connection between their boss and the new bookkeeper. Charlie watched with grandfatherly approval, while young Thomas teased Warren mercilessly when Willa was not around. "Never seen you smile so much, boss," Thomas said one morning while they were mending fence. "Miss Kendrick is good for you." Warren hammered in a nail with more force than necessary. "Mind your own business, Tom. Just saying, you should let her know how you feel before some other cowpoke comes sniffing around. A woman like that will not stay single long out here." The thought of Willa with another man sent a spike of jealousy through Warren's chest that he had no right to feel. She had come here looking for work and security, not romance with a struggling rancher still carrying ghosts. But every morning when he watched her sitting patiently with that impossible horse, every afternoon when her quick mind grasped business concepts he could barely articulate, every evening when they sat together and talked until the stars came out, he fell a little deeper into something he was afraid to name. On the 14th day, Willa stood inside the pen with Phoenix and held out her hand. The stallion snorted, tossed his head, then slowly stepped forward. His soft nose touched her palm, and Willa felt tears sting her eyes at the simple trust in the gesture. "Easy, boy," she whispered. "Easy, Phoenix. You are safe now. I promise you are safe." Outside the pen, Warren gripped the fence rail so hard his knuckles went white. He had been watching Willa work with the blood bay every morning, had seen the gradual transformation from wild fury to cautious acceptance. But this moment of connection hit him square in the chest, with an emotion that stole his breath. He was in love with her. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Somewhere between that first afternoon when she had stood at his fence watching Phoenix buck, and this morning when she coaxed the impossible horse to trust, Warren Mitchell had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with Willa Kendrick. Willa stroked Phoenix's neck, murmuring soft words. When she finally left the pen, her face was radiant with triumph. She spotted Warren and her smile grew even wider. "Did you see? He let me touch him." "I saw." Warren's voice came out rougher than intended. "You did it. You actually did it. We did it," Willa corrected, walking toward him. "He did it. He decided to trust." She was close enough now that Warren could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, could smell the clean scent of her hair beneath the dust and horse. His hand lifted almost of its own accord to cup her cheek. "Willa," he started, then stopped, not knowing how to say everything crowding his heart. She leaned into his touch, her eyes searching his face. "Yes, I." Warren swallowed hard. "Would you take a ride with me this afternoon? There is something I want to show you, of course." He saddled 2 gentle mares after lunch and helped Willa mount, trying not to notice how her hand felt in his or the way her waist curved beneath his steadying grip. They rode out from the ranch into the high country, following narrow trails that wound between towering pines. Warren led them to a high meadow where the aspens were turning gold, and a small stream ran clear and cold from the mountain snow. Below, the valley spread out like a patchwork quilt, and the ranch house looked tiny against the massive landscape. "This is my favorite place in the world," Warren said, dismounting and helping Willa down. "I come here when I need to think, to remember why all the hard work matters." They walked to the stream's edge and sat on a flat rock still warm from the afternoon sun. Willa tucked her riding skirt around her legs and looked out at the vista with wonder in her eyes. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It makes St. Louis seem small and crowded in comparison. Do you miss it? The city, I mean." "I miss my parents, I miss what was, but the city itself." Willa shook her head. "No, I feel like I can breathe here, like there is room for me to become whoever I am meant to be." Warren gathered his courage. "And who is that?" She turned to look at him, and the expression in her eyes made his heart pound. "I do not know yet. But I think maybe I could figure it out if I had reason to stay. Willa, I need to tell you something." Warren took her hand, marveling at how right it felt in his. "These past 2 weeks have been the happiest I have known since before my parents died. You walked into my life like lightning and everything changed. The way you see things, the way you are not afraid to be exactly who you are, the way you took on that impossible horse and proved everyone wrong, it all made me realize what was missing from my life." "What was missing?" Willa whispered. You were missing." Warren lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I know this is fast. I know you came here looking for safety and work, not a rough cowboy with more debts than sense, but I am asking anyway. Willa Kendrick, would you consider staying? Not as an employee, but as my wife. As the woman I want to build this ranch with, build a life with." Tears spilled down Willa's cheeks, catching the sunlight like diamonds. "Warren, I have been half in love with you since that first dinner when you defended me to your ranch hands. Falling the rest of the way was inevitable. Yes, yes, I will marry you." Warren pulled her into his arms, and when their lips met it was like coming home after a long journey. The kiss was tender and searching, full of promise and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I do not have much to offer," Warren said, resting his forehead against hers. This ranch is my whole life, and it is a hard life. It is enough. You are enough." Willa kissed him again. "We will make it work together." They rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, hands linked between their horses, talking about the future with the giddy excitement of new love. Warren wanted to marry soon, before winter closed the mountain passes. Willa agreed, seeing no reason to wait when they were both sure. That evening at dinner, Warren announced their engagement to the household. May let out a delighted cry and hugged Willa fiercely. Charlie slapped Warren on the back hard enough to rattle his teeth, grinning through his beard. Thomas whooped and declared a celebration was in order. "About time, boss," Charlie said. "I was starting to think you would never work up the nerve." "I was starting to think that too," Warren admitted, his arm around Willa's waist. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Silverton, with the ranch hands and half the town in attendance. Willa wore a simple cream dress that May helped her sew, and Warren wore his best suit, his dark hair slicked back and his blue eyes shining with happiness. The circuit preacher pronounced them man and wife as the October sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold. At the ranch, May had prepared a feast, and the celebration lasted well into the night. Warren and Willa danced to fiddle music played by one of the neighboring ranchers, swept up in the joy of the moment. When Warren held her close during a slow song, Willa felt a completeness she had not known was possible. "Happy," Warren murmured against her hair. "Happier than I knew how to be," Willa replied honestly. That night, Warren carried his bride across the threshold of the ranch house and up the stairs to the master bedroom that had stood empty since his mother's death. Willa had moved her few belongings in earlier, but now she stood in the lamplight feeling suddenly nervous. Warren sensed her hesitation and cupped her face gently in his hands. "We do not have to rush anything. I can sleep in another room tonight if you need time." But Willa shook her head, reaching up to loosen his collar. "I do not need time. I need you." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle discoveries. Warren was patient and careful with her inexperience, and Willa gave herself over to the new sensations with trust and growing passion. When they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, both were changed, bound together in ways that went deeper than law or ceremony. "I love you, Willa Mitchell," Warren said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I love you too," she replied, the new surname still feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. Morning brought new routines. Willa woke in Warren's arms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. She dressed and went down to breakfast, where May gave her a knowing smile and an extra helping of eggs. After eating, Willa went to work with Phoenix. The stallion had continued to make progress, now accepting her touch and even a light halter. But when she tried to introduce the saddle, he balked, ears flat, the old wildness flaring in his eyes. "Easy," Willa murmured. "Easy, boy, it is just leather, nothing to fear." She spent the morning desensitizing him to the saddle's presence, draping it over the fence rail where he could smell and investigate it without pressure. Warren watched from a distance, marveling at her patience. "Most men would have given up long ago," Charlie commented, joining Warren at the fence. "Willa is not most men, thank God," Warren replied with a slight smile. "She is good for this place. Good for you. Your mama would have liked her." Warren felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I think she would have loved her." That afternoon, Warren found Willa in the office as usual, but she was staring out the window rather than working on the books. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Penny, for your thoughts." "I was thinking about Phoenix," Willa said, leaning back against him. "He let me touch him, but there is still fear in his eyes. Something happened to him before you found him, something that left scars deeper than the ones on his hide. "Some things cannot be healed," Warren said gently. "But some things can, with time and care and patience." She turned in his arms to face him. "That is what I am learning here, that broken things can be made whole again if someone is willing to do the work." Warren kissed her softly. "You have made me whole again, Willa. I did not realize how broken I was until you showed me what it felt like to be complete." Their kiss deepened, and when Warren lifted her onto the desk, scattering papers, Willa laughed breathlessly against his mouth. They made love in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the office window, urgent and sweet, still learning the geography of each other's bodies. Later, as they lay together on the narrow office couch, hastily dressed and grinning like conspirators, Willa said, "May is going to know what we were doing." "May already knows," Warren replied. "The whole ranch probably knows. I have never been good at hiding my feelings." "Good. I like you transparent." That night at dinner, Thomas announced he was planning to ride into town the next day to pick up supplies. Warren asked him to bring back a particular type of bit he had ordered, one designed to be gentle on a horse's mouth. "For Phoenix?" Thomas asked. "For Phoenix," Warren confirmed. "If my wife says he can be ridden, then we need to prepare for that day." Willa felt a surge of love for this man who trusted her judgment so completely. Around the table, she saw the same trust reflected in Charlie's nod, in May's smile, in Thomas's easy acceptance. This was her family now, this odd collection of people bound together by work and loyalty and something deeper than blood. Winter came early to the high country that year. By late November, snow dusted the peaks every night, and the morning air bit with cold that promised harsher weather to come. Willa worked with Phoenix in shorter sessions, her fingers numb despite her gloves. The stallion had accepted the saddle and bridle now, though he still refused to be mounted. "He will do it when he is ready," Willa told Warren as they stood watching Phoenix pace the pen one blustery afternoon. "Forcing him will only break the trust we have built." "I am not questioning you," Warren assured her. "Just worried about you freezing out here every morning." "I have survived worse." But even as she said it, a shiver ran through her. Warren immediately shrugged out of his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders. "You will catch your death," Willa protested. "Then you will have to keep me warm tonight," Warren replied with a grin that made her blush despite 2 months of marriage. That evening, Willa felt unusually tired and went to bed early. When she woke in the middle of the night, nauseous and dizzy, Warren held her hair back while she was sick into the basin, his hand gentle on her back. "Should I ride for the doctor?" Warren asked, worried. "No," Willa managed. "I think I know what this is." Understanding dawned in Warren's eyes. "Really? Are you sure? I am a week late, and this is the 3rd morning I have felt sick. I am reasonably sure." Warren pulled her into his arms, his face buried in her neck. She felt moisture against her skin and realized he was crying. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Willa asked, her own tears starting. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Warren said roughly. "Terrified, grateful, overwhelmed, but most of all happy." They told no one yet, wanting to keep the secret to themselves for a little while longer. But May's knowing eyes followed Willa at breakfast, and when she pushed extra food onto her plate, Willa knew the cook had guessed. The first real snowstorm hit in early December, trapping them all inside for 3 days. Willa and Warren spent the time in their room, making love and talking about names, about the future, about how their lives were changing in ways neither had imagined 6 months ago. "I want to teach our children about horses," Willa said, lying with her head on Warren's chest. "The way my father taught me." "Our children will be lucky to have you as a mother," Warren replied, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. They will be fearless and smart and stubborn as hell, like their father," Willa teased. When the storm finally broke, Willa returned to working with Phoenix. She could not hide her condition much longer, but she was determined to complete what she had started with the Blood Bay stallion. On a bright December morning, with the sun turning the snow to diamonds, Willa stood in the pen with Phoenix and carefully mounted him for the first time. The stallion tensed, every muscle coiled to explode, but Willa sat quiet and still, her weight balanced, her hands gentle on the reins. "Easy," she whispered. "You are safe, Phoenix. I promise you are safe." The stallion stood trembling for a long moment. Then, slowly, his muscles relaxed. He took one step forward, then another. Willa let out a breath she had not realized she was holding and gently guided him into a slow walk around the pen. Outside the fence, Warren watched with his heart in his throat. Willa had done it. She had taken the horse that threw every hand on the place and turned him into something magnificent. More than that, she had done it with patience and respect, proving that strength did not always mean domination. When Willa finally dismounted and led Phoenix to the fence, the stallion followed her like a loyal dog. Warren opened the gate and pulled his wife into his arms, not caring who saw. "You did it," he said against her hair. "God, Willa, you actually did it." "We did it," she corrected. "Phoenix did it. He decided to trust." That night they announced both pieces of news at dinner, the baby and Phoenix's successful first ride. The celebration was loud and joyous, with May crying happy tears and Charlie declaring it the best news the ranch had seen in years. "A baby and a trained Blood Bay in 1 year," Thomas marveled. "You two do not do anything by halves." "Life is too short for half measures," Warren said, his arm around Willa. "I learned that the hard way." Winter deepened, and Willa's body changed with it. By February, she was showing clearly, and Warren fussed over her constantly, insisting she stay inside when the weather was bad, making sure she ate enough, driving her slightly crazy with his protective instincts. "I am pregnant, not dying," Willa finally snapped one morning when he tried to prevent her from going to the barn. Warren looked stricken. "I just want to keep you safe, both of you." Willa's anger melted. She took his face in her hands. "I know, but you need to trust that I know my own limits." "I will not take foolish risks, I promise." He nodded, but she could see the fear lurking in his blue eyes. She understood it. They had both lost so much already. The thought of losing each other was unbearable. Phoenix continued to improve under Willa's training. By March, Warren was riding him regularly, marveling at the stallion's power and speed now that it was channeled rather than fought. The Blood Bay had become the finest horse on the ranch, worth 10 times what Warren had initially paid to capture him. "We could sell him for a fortune," Charlie pointed out one afternoon. "We are not selling him," Warren said firmly. "That horse is family." In April, when the mountain passes cleared and the high meadows began to green, Willa went into labor. Warren rode for the doctor in Silverton, pushing his horse dangerously fast over the muddy roads. He burst into Doc Henderson's office wild-eyed and incoherent. "It is Willa, the baby. You have to come now." Doc Henderson, a calm man in his 60s, gathered his bag without hurry. "First babies take time, son. She will be fine." But Warren could not be calm. He paced the porch while May and Doc Henderson attended to Willa upstairs, jumping at every cry that filtered through the windows. Charlie tried to distract him with whiskey, but Warren could not drink, could barely breathe. "What if something goes wrong?" Warren said raggedly. "What if I lose her?" "You will not," Charlie said firmly. "That wife of yours is tough as boot leather. She will be fine, and so will the baby." It was full dark when Doc Henderson finally emerged, his sleeves rolled up and a tired smile on his face. "Congratulations, Warren. You have a son." Warren took the stairs 3 at a time. Willa lay propped against pillows, exhausted but glowing, a small bundle cradled in her arms. When she looked up and saw him, her smile was radiant. "Warren, meet your son." He approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe, and looked down at the tiny red face peeking from the blankets. The baby had dark hair like his father and was currently screaming with impressive volume. "He is perfect," Warren whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You are perfect. God, Willa, I love you so much." "I love you too." She guided his hand to touch the baby's impossibly small fingers. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Warren knew exactly what to call him. "James, after your father." Willa's eyes filled with fresh tears. "James Mitchell, it is perfect." Warren climbed carefully onto the bed beside them, and they sat together, the 3 of them, as the April stars came out over the San Juan Mountains. In that moment, Warren felt a peace he had not known was possible. Everything he had lost, all the grief and struggle, had led him here to this perfect moment with his wife and child. The ranch fell into new rhythms after James was born. Willa managed the books while nursing the baby, and Warren found excuses to come inside throughout the day just to hold his son. May spoiled the baby shamelessly, and even gruff Charlie could be found making ridiculous faces to earn a toothless smile. Phoenix, too, seemed to sense the importance of the new addition. When Willa finally felt strong enough to return to the barn, the stallion snuffled gently at the bundle in her arms, his dark eyes soft. "Gentle," Willa murmured. "This is James. You will watch over him, will you not?" The blood bay tossed his head as if in agreement, and from that day forward, Phoenix was protective of the baby. When James was old enough to be carried on horseback, it was Phoenix who bore him with careful steps, as gentle as a lamb. That first summer was golden. The ranch prospered as Willa's changes to the business model paid off, and they were able to hire 2 more hands to help with the increased herd. Warren built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms for the family he hoped would continue to grow. On their first anniversary in October, Warren and Willa rode back to the high meadow, leaving James with May for the afternoon. The aspens were turning gold again, and the stream ran clear and cold. "1 year," Willa said wonderingly, sitting on the same flat rock where Warren had proposed. "It feels like a lifetime." "It feels like yesterday," Warren countered, settling beside her. "I remember exactly how you looked that day, how terrified I was that you would say no." "I could never have said no to you," Willa said, leaning against him. "You were inevitable from the first moment." "I just did not realize it yet." They made love on a blanket under the afternoon sun, then lay together watching the clouds drift over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. "I want more," Willa said softly. "More children, more years, more of this life we are building together." "So do I," Warren agreed. "As many years as God grants us, I want to spend them all with you." By the time James was 2, Willa was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. In June of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, after Warren's mother. Catherine had her mother's brown eyes and a disposition as fierce as Phoenix on a bad day. "She's going to give us trouble," Warren predicted, cradling his screaming daughter. "Good," Willa said, exhausted but satisfied. "The world needs more women who refuse to be tamed." Warren laughed and kissed her forehead. "I should have known you would raise warriors." The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1890, Warren had paid off all his father's debts and owned the land free and clear. They had 6 good hands, a thriving herd, and a reputation for fair dealing that brought buyers from as far away as Denver. Much of the success was due to Willa's sharp business sense and Warren's willingness to listen to her counsel. Phoenix lived to the remarkable age of 23, retiring to an easy life in the home pasture, where he spent his days grazing and accepting tribute from the ranch children. When he finally passed peacefully in his sleep one spring morning, Warren and Willa buried him on the high meadow they loved, marking the grave with a simple stone that read, "Phoenix, who taught us that some things cannot be broken, only understood." James grew into a tall young man with his father's easy way with horses and his mother's head for business. Catherine proved as stubborn and smart as predicted, insisting on learning everything her brother learned and usually besting him at it. A third child, a daughter named Sarah, arrived when Catherine was 3, rounding out the family. On winter evenings, the Mitchell family gathered in the large parlor Warren had built, and Willa would tell stories of how she came to Silverton, of the blood-bay stallion that threw every hand on the place, and how she whispered him still. The children never tired of the tale, even though they knew every word by heart. "Tell us about Phoenix," James would beg. "Tell us how Mama tamed him." "I did not tame him," Willa would always correct. "I gave him reasons to trust. There is a difference." Warren would watch his wife from across the room, still falling in love with her a little more each day, marveling at the miracle that had walked into his life 20 years ago and changed everything. The grief that had nearly destroyed him felt distant now, healed by time and love and the family they had built together. In the summer of 1904, when Warren was 46 and Willa 42, they took their adult children and rode up to the high meadow for a picnic. James was preparing to attend university in Denver to study veterinary medicine. Catherine was engaged to the son of a neighboring rancher, a young man sensible enough to appreciate her fierce spirit. Sarah, at 14, was torn between following her sister into marriage or her brother into education. They spread blankets near Phoenix's grave and ate May's fried chicken while watching clouds drift over the peaks. Warren sat with his back against a tree. Willa nestled between his legs and felt a contentment so complete it was almost painful. "What are you thinking?" Willa asked, tipping her head back to look at him. "That I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Warren replied honestly. "That everything I went through, all the loss and struggle, was worth it to end up here with you." "We are not at the end yet," Willa pointed out. "We still have years ahead of us." "Good. I am not nearly done with you, Mrs. Mitchell." Willa turned in his arms and kissed him, long and sweet, while their children groaned in mock disgust. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. That night, back at the ranch, Warren and Willa stood on their porch watching the stars come out. Inside, they could hear their children laughing over some shared joke. May was singing in the kitchen, and somewhere in the barn, the horses were settling in for the night. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Warren asked, his arm around Willa's waist. "About living before dying." "I remember everything about that day," Willa replied. "You were right, and you taught me how to live again. Every day with you has been a gift I never expected to receive." Willa turned to face him, her hands coming up to frame his face. After 20 years, she knew every line, every scar, every expression. She had watched silver thread through his dark hair and laugh lines deepen around his eyes. She had seen him in joy and sorrow, in triumph and defeat, and she loved every version of him. "You gave me a home when I had none," Willa said. "You gave me purpose and family and a love I did not know existed. You let me be exactly who I am, wild edges and all." "I fell in love with the wild edges first," Warren admitted. The woman who would not accept that something was impossible just because everyone said so. They kissed under the Colorado stars, Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. Inside, their children continued to laugh. In the barn, horses dozed in their stalls. On the high meadow, wind whispered over Phoenix's grave. The blood bay had thrown every hand on the place, until the cowboy's new bride whispered him still. It was not magic or dominance or force. It was patience and respect, and the quiet understanding that some things must be earned, never taken. The lesson had transformed a wild stallion and saved a struggling ranch, but more importantly, it had taught two wounded souls how to trust again. In the years that followed, the Mitchell Ranch became known throughout Colorado not just for its horses and cattle, but for the love story at its heart. People spoke of Warren and Willa the way others spoke of legends, as proof that sometimes broken things could be made whole, that patience could tame the wildest spirit, and that love, when given freely and honestly, could transform everything it touched. James did attend university and became a veterinarian, returning to Silverton to practice, and eventually taking over the ranch's horse breeding program. He married a schoolteacher from Denver, a practical woman who shared his love of animals and his parents' talent for partnership. Catherine married her rancher's son in a ceremony that filled the small Silverton church to bursting. She proved as capable a rancher as her new husband, and together they built an empire that stretched across 3 valleys. Her children would grow up hearing stories of their grandmother who tamed the legendary phoenix, and they would learn from her example that women could be both strong and gentle, fierce and loving. Sarah surprised everyone by choosing neither marriage nor university, instead opening a horse training business that drew clients from across the West. She had inherited her mother's gift with difficult animals and her father's steady patience, and the combination made her sought after and respected. She never married, finding fulfillment in her work and freedom, though she had many offers. Warren and Willa lived to see their grandchildren born and thriving. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by family, Warren stood to make a toast. His hair was fully silver now, his face weathered by 3 decades of mountain sun, but his blue eyes were as clear and loving as the day he had first asked Willa to stay. 30 years ago, a woman stepped off the stage from St. Louis with nothing but courage and a battered carpetbag. She looked at a wild horse that had defeated every man on this ranch and saw not a problem to be solved, but a spirit that needed understanding. She taught that horse to trust, and in doing so, she taught me the same lesson. Willa, you have been my partner, my best friend, my conscience, and my home. Everything good in my life traces back to the day you said yes. Here is to 30 more years and whatever comes after that. Willa stood and took his hand, tears streaming down her face. You gave me more than I dreamed possible. You gave me respect and freedom and a love that never tried to tame me. You let me be wild and soft at the same time, fierce and vulnerable. You have been my anchor and my adventure, and I would choose you again in every lifetime. They kissed to the sound of clapping and cheering, their children and grandchildren bearing witness to a love that had survived everything life threw at it and emerged stronger. Warren passed away peacefully in his sleep at 71, on a winter morning when the mountains were painted white with fresh snow. Willa woke beside him and knew immediately, felt the absence of his warmth, the terrible stillness. She held him for a long time, memorizing the face she had loved for 33 years, saying goodbye to the best part of her life. They buried him next to Phoenix on the high meadow, with the whole county in attendance. Willa stood dry-eyed through the ceremony, her children on either side holding her up, and when the last prayer was said, she placed her hand on the fresh-turned earth. "Thank you," she whispered, "for every day, every laugh, every moment, Thank you for teaching me what love really means. Wait for me, Warren. I will find you again when my time comes. Willa lived another 8 years, still managing the ranch books, still riding when weather permitted, still telling stories to her grandchildren about Phoenix and the cowboy who had stolen her heart. She never remarried, could not imagine wanting anyone else. Warren had been her great love, her once-in-a-lifetime, and she was content with the memory. She died on a bright morning in late spring, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Her family found her there, peaceful and smiling, a letter from Warren clutched in her hand. He had written it for their first anniversary, and she had kept it all these years, reading it whenever she missed him too much to bear. My dearest Willa, it read in Warren's strong script. Today marks 1 year since you agreed to share your life with mine, and I find myself overwhelmed with gratitude. You walked into my life like lightning, bright and fierce, and impossible to ignore. You showed me that broken things could heal, that wild spirits could trust without losing themselves, that love was not about taming or owning but about understanding and respecting. You saved Phoenix, but more importantly, you saved me. Every morning I wake beside you feels like a miracle I do not deserve but will spend my life trying to earn. I love you more than I have words to express. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Thank you for showing me how to live again. Yours always, Warren. They buried Willa next to Warren on the high meadow, with Phoenix on his other side. 3 graves overlooking the valley they had all loved, the land they had helped tame without ever being tamed themselves. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, and the story of the Blood Bay stallion and the woman who whispered him still became legend. Years later, people would still ride up to the high meadow to see the 3 graves, to pay respects to a love story that had defined an era. The inscriptions were simple: Warren Mitchell, 1858–1929. Beloved husband, father, and friend. He learned how to live. Willa Kendrick Mitchell, 1862–1937. Beloved wife, mother, and trailblazer. She taught us that patience and respect can tame the wildest spirit. Phoenix, 1882–1905. The Blood Bay who threw every hand on the place, until love whispered him still. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind came down from the mountains just right, people swore they could hear it. The sound of hoofbeats on the meadow grass, a woman's laugh, a man's deep voice, all the sounds of love that never really dies but echoes through the years, reminding us that some things, the very best things, last forever. The Double M Ranch prospered through the decades, through 2 world wars and the Great Depression, through droughts and hard winters and changing times. But at its heart, it remained what Warren and Willa had made it, a place where broken things could heal, where wild spirits found understanding, where love was given freely and honestly. The Blood Bay had thrown every hand on the place, but the cowboy's new bride had whispered him still. It was a story of patience over force, understanding over domination, love over fear. It was the story of how 2 wounded people found each other and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. And in the end, it was proof that sometimes the wildest things cannot be broken, only understood, that the fiercest spirits make the truest partners. And that love, real love, is not about changing someone into what you need them to be, but about giving them the space and safety to become who they were always meant to be. Warren and Willa Mitchell understood that truth. They lived it every day of their lives together. And the legacy they left behind, in their children and their grandchildren and the ranch that still bears their name, is the simple, profound message that love built on respect and trust and patience will outlast everything else. The mountains stand eternal over Silverton, Colorado. The streams still run cold and clear from winter snow. And on the high meadow where 3 graves watch over the valley, the wind whispers stories of love that transcended the limits of one lifetime, echoing into forever.